Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface with AzChats 52! AzChats 52. I know, they're getting out a little bit more regularly now that we've got number 50 out of the way. Now, if you're fresh to my channel or fresh to my AzChats videos, these are more podcasty type of a video as opposed to a visual video. This is something for your ears to touch and caress and hold and love and then have its heart broken. And no, sorry, this is my life. So there's something more for your ears as opposed to your eyes. But I will put some candy on the screen for you to have a look at. But if there are things that you want to get on with around the house, crank up the volume. And then by all means, go away and fiddle with whatever aspects need fiddling with. And because this is an AzChats type of a video, there will be, no doubt, at some point, fruity language. That means a language of an adult nature. So if you are offended by such words in such contexts, then please don't watch the video. Don't do it to yourself. Don't wind yourself up over it, okay? Or if you're young and you think that you might be exposing yourself to all manner of evils, then why not just get your parents to listen to it? And if they are okay with the manner in which it's been projected, then it's their blessing, not mine. So it's quite an interesting AzChat, because normally, well, I'm sort of using that as a loose way to big it up, because normally when I do an AzChat, it's about something else. When I say it's about something else, you know, it's about a piece of content, it's about a video game, it's about this, that, and the other. But I'm sort of in the AzChats, woven into this AzChats, because it kind of goes to my review of 6.2, but it also goes into the more underlying question of how does a game like the World of Warcraft, how does a powerhouse like the game of World of Warcraft get into the state that it's currently in now? Because I don't think Blizzard quite understand the shit that they're in at the moment, and I'll kind of explain that as the course of the video goes on. Now, when I did my review for patch 6.2, it's quite a scathing review, and rightly so, because it is not a very good patch, and I gave it an average mark. I gave it a 5 out of 10. I'm in a good mood today. Trust me, it could have got lower. Depending on whether or not I was on my period. But I've been in quite a good mood today, and I kind of gave it 5 out of 10. Mediocre patch for very mediocre content. The only thing kind of holding it up, really, was the weight of Hellfire Citadel, the raid, and also the fantastic work that the art department put into a game. And this is no exception. The Blizzard art team, both character and environmental, put so much heart and soul into their work that their canvas is there for all to see. I mean, their work is just as exposed as any piece of content that you will do in the game. And it's kind of that element which I really want to focus on. Or that's going to be certainly a focal point in this video. Because heart and soul are very important when you create content for a video game. It's very much like when you make a film, and it's very much like if you make a spoof film. Now, for argument's sake, if anyone has seen the Airplane movies, Airplane 1 or Airplane 2, or the Naked Gun franchise, then those films are hilarious, absolutely hilarious, and they are spoofs of genres. And a spoof can only truly work if the people that make it have love for the source material. So in the case of the Airplane movies, these weren't just people making daft gags, although there were plenty of daft gags. These weren't just people making daft gags and throwing, you know, shit at a wall and seeing what would stick in an effort to make a spoof movie. No. The Zucker brothers were people who had a love of the disaster movie tag. You know how things get categorized. Adventure movie, horror movie. They loved the disaster movie sort of franchise, and there was lots of disaster movies going on when those movies were made, earthquakes and the towering infernos and all this kind of stuff, and they loved these movies, and they took that love and they turned it into the airplane movies. This disaster movie of people in an airplane, high above, you know, flying, and it is just insanely funny. The same with The Naked Gun. The Naked Gun follows Frank Drebin, Leslie Nielsen, God rest his soul, what a beautiful man he was. And you have him as a bungling police officer. And that whole series of Police Squad and then going into The Naked Gun was built up because, again, the Zucker brothers, who did the same franchise, loved both detective crime programs, and we're talking about Streets of San Francisco and going further back into time as regards to them, and also the detective noir themes as well. They really loved them, and they put that love together, and then they got Police Squad, and then they got the Naked Gun franchise. When you look at other movies today, like the gazillion American Pie sequels, and I'm not talking like 2 and 3, I'm talking about, you know, Bandcamp shite this and Bandcamp shite that, and you look at all the other, you know, superhero movie and all this kind of jazz, which just kind of tries to rip off contemporary movies in an effort to make a bang, to make a quick buck, make a quick bang of a buck. Those movies are not made with love. They're not made with a love of the genre. They're not made of a love of that theme of movie. The people that did like superhero movie and all that kind of stuff, they don't love superhero movies. They were just trying to coin in on superhero movies. And that's why films like that turn out to be exactly what they are. Complete fucking disaster. A 1 out of 10 trash, throw it into the reject bin movie. So unless you have true love for a product, unless you have true heart and soul with a product, whenever you put whatever you're doing, whether it be the art department or whether it be the content department, and we're talking about the World of Warcraft now, whenever you put your thoughts, feelings, love, idea, heart and soul into a game, it shows. And that's why World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor is by far the best looking World of Warcraft expansion we've ever had, because the heart and soul of the art department is there. Their canvas, as I've said, is for all to see. Their CV is for all to see. If you were looking at Draenor and it looked shit, you know, you would be like, oh dear. And it's, the art department would be exposed. Well, that's, you know, that's not very good, and that's, and all this kind of jazz. And it's also an acting template. It's an acting CV, curriculum vitae, for all to see. If somebody, just for argument's sake, I'm just brain farting here, say that Final Fantasy XIV wanted a couple of new artists, and they wanted them to come from the MMORPG marketplace, and they didn't want to have them tainted by the anime style, which they do. They wanted somebody to bring new ideas and new life and love into their world to create something fresh content-wise. There's no better place to look than a game like World of Warcraft, for example, because that sort of quirky artwork shows great diversity. It also shows how they can create amazing assets with what is essentially quite an old engine with a video game, and how they've managed to improve over time to still keep the quirkiness of the World of Warcraft look, but still make it amazing. Make it amazing and feel as if it deserves its place in a contemporary marketplace. The same, however, cannot be said at all about the content department. Because when you look at the content that we've had in 6.2, and I'm trying to say this out of position of love, I really am. When you look at just the amount of the rehashed Apexis zones that are going to come about in Tanaan Jungle, and then we have a look at how the shipyard, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to get turned to shit yard or ship-tard and all those kind of it's going to get slurred into one of those in a matter of, I don't know, days, weeks, I don't know, but it's going to turn into one of those very quickly indeed, because you've had the art department produce an amazing shipyard, and then you've had the content department condense it and turn it all into a command table. There's nothing we can physically do in the shipyard. We can't interact with any of our ships. We can't go onto the ships, we can't sail anywhere, we can't interact with the sailors, we can't put followers onto a ship and go off and do a mission, we can't go in the submarine and explore ruins below the ground, below the sea, below the ground, submarines in the ground, below the sea, at the bottom of the sea, ruins from the Ogre Empire, or maybe even discover fresh ruins from a bygone era. And all this kind of exciting stuff which could have been done, and it could have been utilised with the great technology which Blizzard brought in, the scenario technology, where they can instance a small proportion of the world and then develop and create from there. So the idea, or certainly the reality of a shipyard, could have been something vastly different. Vastly different. And one of the most exciting pieces of content that the World of Warcraft has created to date. And then, unfortunately, what we do get is a command table. So that kind of shows lack of imagination, lack of passion, lack of love, lack of desire. It's as if they sort of went to the art department and went, could you create us this great big shipyard where you build these 4 or 5 different types of ship, and the art department was like, yeah, and then we can put a lighthouse over there, that'd be quite cool. And you can see them sort of taking that idea and their imagination going wild, and then they create what we've got here. But it's got to have the theme of Stormwind, or it's got to have the theme of Orgrimmar to keep in keeping with our garrison theme. Okay, yeah, no problem. And then they present it to them. They're like, what are you going to do with this? And they go, we're just sticking a command table on it. And I'm like, as an artist, I know I would get paid for doing my job, but as an artist, I would be mortified. I'd be so upset. I'd be like, just create this great world, or this great zone, or this piece here, and this piece, the Temple of Caribou, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, yeah, we're not going to use that for anything. That's not going to be used for anything. That's going to be used for everything. You have to be pretty thick-skinned. You really do have to be pretty thick-skinned to just go, okay, yeah, cool, no problem. I've done what I need to do. You do whatever you want with it. Because I've been around different types of artists all my life, whether I'm not just talking about pad and pen artists, I'm talking about poets, I'm talking about all different content creators now, where there's a lot of artistic content creators out there. I'm not talking about certainly with the machinima, as if we want to make it about WoW, but I'm also talking about different facets as well. People that create weird and wonderful things, and it's all in the name of artistry. And kind of spending so much of my life around and coming from an artistic background in my family, not saying it rubs off on me, mind you, I'm not going there, folks. I do understand, or do certainly have a good idea of the temperament of an artist, and I think it would take a very, very, very sturdy mind person just to go, and just shrug it all off. To my eyes, the art department surely cannot be happy with what's kind of being implemented with their amazing work. That's how I would feel. I'm not trying to put words in their mouths. I'm just saying from the point of view which I've come from the the experiences which I've had in life and all that kind of stuff. That's how I would view it. So we have patch 6.2, and Tanaan's looking great. I think Tanaan looks great. One thing you have to understand immediately is Tanaan's a jungle, right? So you're always going to get a jungle feel to it. Have they managed to do that? Absolutely, if you ask me. The bulk of Tanaan, you can see, is from a jungle environment. And so that's absolutely spot on. Kudos to them for doing that. And then what they've done is they've then twisted some of it. So the Sabrons have managed to convert an aspect into their little city, their little town, whatever you want to call it, their abode. And then you have a little bit of insectozoid shite going on. And then we have like a burnt out place, a place which seems to be affected somehow with some sort of flame or fire. And I'm not sure if it's hellfire or not, but it seems to be burnt out and derelict, and it still looks fantastic. And then, of course, we have the battlefield going on with the Northern Front, the Iron Front. Then we have the Shatari, not the Shatari, but the Sargari Ish. Draenei, who have got their base of operations there, and it's fell corrupted, but at the same time it still has that jungle feel to it because that's where it was initially constructed on. Then the Bleeding Hollow, how they've converted the jungle environment just to construct their own little huts and such. And then we have the big Burning Legion area, which, you know, was on the throne of Kil'jaeden, this sort of mountain terrain, which has very much been sort of Fel orientated and Legion orientated. So they've done this amazing job with what they could, with the idea of constructing a jungle. And then, content-wise, you have to say to yourself, we have a full zone here. We have a full zone which we can create external content for people to do. We have an environment which we can start to develop different aspects of content and different types of content for people to experience. And when you start to look at the new factions that are coming in 6.2, you quickly realise they are 100% an afterthought. When you see them and the way they've been constructed, you have to say to yourself, if Blizzard want to tell me these 3 factions were planned, I wouldn't believe them. I legitimately wouldn't believe them because they are so shoddily put together, so badly put together. And then when they are deploying the content around Tanaan, there's like I'm just counting out loud here, so bear with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think from the top of my head, I could miss a couple if I have. There are 6 Apexis crystal zones around Tanaan that just go on a rotation from the command table in your hub. And external to those 6, you have the Sabron area, which is just a mob grind rep. You have the insect area, which has nothing involved with it whatsoever. There is a rare mob that spawns there from time to time, and that is it. And then you have the raid in the middle. And you have to say, how does a team of well-paid game developers only come up with this? And what is more sort of worrying, because as I said at the start of the video, I don't think Blizzard understand the shit that they are really in. And that'll still not ready to talk about that yet. We'll come back to that. Still not ready to talk about that. But we are talking about a patch which has been on the PTR now for a couple of months. I'd say a couple of months or so. You know, maybe even slightly more. It's been on the PTR for a good while now. And it's also been on the PTR over a transition period. And a transition period where we've actually got the first quarterly figures for this month. Where we as players, we as people, well, I'm not a player anymore because I'm unsubscribed. We as people have found out the sub losses to Warlords of Draenor, which is 3 million. They had 10 million. It's now 7 million, give or take 100,000. But, you know, I'm just rounding it up. They've essentially lost 30% of their whole custom base in the first 3 months. Something that's never, ever been experienced before in the World of Warcraft. In WoW, the biggest loss before was a lot less, about 1.1 million in Mists of Pandaria. So that is a staggering big loss. But Blizzard knew that before we did. Blizzard, of course, you know, it's not as if Blizzard just found out that day and went, right, let's just release the figures. Oh my God, we've lost 3 million. No, they've known since the beginning of the year, when the Q1 figures started, what the drop-offs have been day on day, week on week, month on month. So they knew exactly how many they'd lost by the end of March. There was no doubt about that. They had absolutely every idea. And to me, if you had discovered that you had lost 30% of your customer base in the first 3 months of this year realised, certainly if you go to the forums, I know it's a horrible place to go from time to time, but when you go to the forums and you look at the speech going on in the forums, how people, because, you know, not very positive places are forums, let's face it, it's really, forums are there for some people to go, thank you, and for a lot of people to go, this is shit. And the forums were, you know, really saying about, you know, this Apexis crystal bollocks, you know, this is boring and dull. And then, you know, the first one in 6.0 was bad enough, doing one a day. But now you're wanting us to go and buy them for garrison resources and do as many as you want. Fuck off. You know, shove them at your asses. The rewards for them are terrible. They're boring. You know, come on, give us something else to do. So you know that your community is having a good whinge and a moan about a piece of content, which, let's face it, is shit. You yourself, in a recent Q&A, admit that Apexis crystal areas are not working how you envisaged or wanted them to work. They've not done what you hoped they would do. So they're not actually a proper functioning piece of content right now. You've had your figures. You know that things are bad. You've got a big patch which you're looking to stem the flow of losses. One thing that Blizzard did fantastically with 5.2 was stop the rot with Mists of Pandaria sub-losses. 5.0 and 5.1 didn't bring huge amounts to the table, and people were leaving hand over fist. 5.2 came out, and it was freaking brilliant. It was a brilliant patch because it brought so many different choices for people to do. Did you want to just grind mobs? You had the Isle of Giants, and you had some good rewards for doing so. Hunters got pets, physical pets I'm talking about here. Everybody got little pets, dino from the Dinomancers. You could also grind bones, get more pets, get a bit of money, or get another mount, get the white bone skin raptor thingy. Get that as well. It was a really cool place, and you also had one of the world bosses on there, Undasta, probably one of the most powerful world bosses that we've ever had. Then you had the Isle of Thunder, where you had much more succinct daily areas. Instead of having gazillions of dailies, we suddenly had pockets of dailies. You're going to get 3 or 4 from that person. They'll take you through to another area. You'll get 3 or 4 there, and then you tend to like finish it off with a bang. So that made it bearable. 3 quests in one area, moving on to another area to do another 3, and then ending in a different area. Always changed up your aesthetic. It always kept you moving and grooving and pushing and a shoving and whatever. But you know what I mean. So you always had that going on for you there. You also had the rares, which you could go around and farm. First of all, because they gave you justice points if you defeated them. A little bit, but every little bit helped. And if you were a warlock, of course, you had the potential for it to drop the item, which unlocked the Green Fire questline. So you could go off and do that, which was about a 30-minute scenario in total. It was fantastic. Fan-freaking-tastic. And then, also, for just the regular people farming the rares, they could potentially drop a key to the Palace of Lei Shen, which allowed you to go off and do the Troves of the Thunder King scenario, the loot-based scenario. You're running around and you're just grabbing as much money as possible. Then you had the Throne of Thunder, where you had to unlock each of the separate areas by cooperation with both the Horde and the Alliance, by completing your missions, defeating your mobs, and then week upon week, or however long it took you to do, another segment of the Throne of Thunder was unlocked. And you would go through to the next one, and then you would eventually get into the courtyard and unlock the second of the 2 world bosses that came in 5.2. And of course, you also had the Throne of Thunder, as well as also 5-person missions, which you could go around the island do, which awarded 150, 125 Valor points. Put it this way, a very healthy chunk of Valor points in an expansion where Valor points were difficult to get. Look, from what you can gather from the few minutes which I've been explaining the 5.2 content off the top of my bonds, there's a lot of variation there. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's something really for everybody. And also the PvPers could choose PvP tasks to do as opposed to PvE tasks. which would have got them honour points and a bit of conquest points. So the way that they constructed everything was really, really clever. They wanted to stem the loss of subscribers. This came out approximately, I don't know how long after launch of, I'm not going to guess. But it came out, you know, not too long after launch of Mists of Pandaria, and it did the job. It worked. It was a very good way of plugging the gap. I'm not saying that all the subscription losses were plugged because of it, because it still had a stem of losses, but it certainly stopped that big flow. It certainly stopped that big ploosh of people just unsubscribing because Mist was driving us insane with the gazillion and bazillion dailies that it was offering. We suddenly had choices, options, and lots of different facets going on. So well done to 5.2. This is exactly what 6.2 should have been. This is their opportunity to say, we've lost 3 million, we need to stop the rot. We need to bring people the kind of content which gave them the excitement at 6.0. Because we were really excited for Warlords of Draenor. We had this great world of Draenor, we had these great levelling up options, and it was very narrative driven. That's why levelling up is so much, one of the reasons why levelling up is so much fun is because they have a heavy narrative. They have a heavy story going through them, and you have lots of different segments of story that usually come to a nice little conclusion. A game like Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn doesn't even stop there. When you get to top level, it unlocks a whole new storyline, a whole new narrative for you to go on. And if you get to top level in Final Fantasy and you want to spend your time and click the stopwatch to do all the storyline and finish it, it will take you probably around 20 hours to do. That is how narrative driven this MMORPG is. I'm just saying, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to have a fight between two MMORPGs here. I'm just telling you about how one uses narrative and how one used narrative. And they both use narrative very well in leveling up. One just goes further when you hit top level, and World of Warcraft stops. When the narrative stops, people can't connect to your game. When the narrative stops, you have no way to tell your customer and your player how they feel about whichever Apex's crystal area you're taking them to, or to whichever faction they are grinding rep with, because there is no connection. There is nothing. And this is why the factions in 6.2 are so bad. And this is why the factions in 6.0 are so bad, because we had a connection when we were leveling up with some of it. When we were in Spires of Iraq, we had a connection to the, it wasn't the Order of the Wake, it was the Arakoa Outcasts. Because we discovered their story and we started to work for them. But when we hit level 100, stopped. All the narrative with it stopped. It stopped. And then we just finished off getting to Exalted by grinding mobs. It makes no physical sense. It makes no mental sense. Why you would do that. The Shatari defense for Shatrath. This was one of the most perfect opportunities to tell an amazing story. Because if you have been, and I guarantee about 95+% of you haven't, if you have been up to the various levels of Shatrath, by going on the lifts and going out and seeing the living quarters and going right to the top and all this kind of jazz, you would see some phenomenal areas that are surrounding Shatrath. But no, the vast majority of people would just turn up, go down the main turbo lift, go outside, and probably just go down some steps and kill the stuff, maybe go down to the docks and kill some more stuff. There's no narrative. It got boring so quickly, just grinding rep. That was the perfect opportunity to say, do you know what we'll do with the Shatari defense? What we'll do with them is we'll actually turn it into a quest hub. And that's where the difference between giving people reputation variations would work. And you would say, right, every person who turns up there will give you 5 dailies per day. Let's just say that for argument's sake. 5 dailies per day, which could take you to a different section of Shattrath to just do some daily quests there. And then you would go back, you'd still get your inane amount of rep that you get for killing them. You know, your 2, your 3, your 4, your 5, your 6 for killing them. But when you went back and handed in your quest, then you get your 250 or your 300, depending on what buildings you had in your garrison or whether you were human or not, that would pump it up. That would just give you that little, oh yeah, you know? Yeah, I got a bit of rep for killing some mobs while I was there, but this was the meat and potatoes of it. And that might give people the incentive to come back and do it. But we haven't all seen. But MMO Champion a little while ago released the figures of how many people were exalted and how many people were doomed with the factions. And I did a video on it called Bad Reputations. Check it out in my video file. But put it this way, nobody, it's fucking next to nothing of people actually completing the reputations because of how bad they were. If you can't connect narratively with content, it's going to fail. This is why Apex's crystal grinds fail, because they have no narrative. They are not driven by any story. You have no connection as to why you should just go over there. The Iron Horde are being nasty on the harbour, go sort them out. Where's the narrative? There's no narrative, because 2 days later you go back to the table and it says the Iron Horde are being naughty by the harbour, sort them out. You know, no narrative. Again, so you just turn out and go, kill, kill, kill. Right, I'm out of here. It's like clocking out of work. I'm clocked in at 9 o'clock, you know, I've done my hour, I'm enough now, isn't it? If you can't connect with the content is going to be boring. So if you put sex, Freud will have a field day with that, ladies and gentlemen. I won't edit that out. I'll keep it in. If there are, I was going all French. It's French for 6. If there are 6 Apexis crystal areas in Tanaan, and then 1 Saberon mob grind area, and very little else, how on earth, as a game developer, can you say the audience will connect with Tanaan? You can't. Tanaan it's oppressive in all the wrong ways. It's not oppressive because of the great aesthetic. That has a great feel to it. And it's not oppressive to the forces of evil that are challenging us. It's oppressive because I can't connect with it. I don't give a shit about Tanaan Jungle. I don't give a shit about what the Iron Horde are doing because you're not telling me. I don't give a shit about the Saberons because you're not telling me about that. I don't give a shit about the Hand of the Prophet with Yril because you haven't given me any shits to care about there. I don't give a shit about Vol'jin's Headhunters. It just sounds like a heavy metal group gone wrong. I don't give a shit about the Order of the Awakened because... why? Where is my connection to any of this? There isn't anything that does. So how can I care about your content? And if I can't care about your content in Tanaan, how can I care about Tanaan? And if I can't care about Tanaan, how the fuck can I care about 6.2? I can't! Because you have not given us any driving force, any narrative for us to care. And this is why the art department show everything. They show everything in their work, their heart and their soul in their work. And this is where the development team shows exactly how little you care. Because your content is your heart and soul. Your content that you put out there is saying to the community, this is what we think is going to be fun and interesting for you to do. This is what we think you're going to connect to and to enjoy going forward for the next few months until the next content patch. So what we see is laziness. Reused Apexis Crystal areas that we've just done for 8 months now, and now 6 more for us to do. Lazy. Unimaginative. We have a mob grind. with the Sabrons that you said you weren't going to do, Ian. This is directly in this bit. That you said in a tweet Tanan wouldn't have. And there it is. Liar, liar, pants on fire, Ian. There it is. So it just says lazy. As a developer, as a game developer of the World of Warcraft, we are showing you that we don't care. We don't care. And I'll briefly touch, because this is going on more than I actually expected it to go on for. But then we have to look at, briefly, the dungeons. And instead of saying Time Walker dungeons, and then coming up with a pretty nifty concept. And again, the Time Walker dungeons, let me just do one thing for you. And, you know, show you how to do your job properly. I'm going to pull the Saberon faction from the game, okay? So I'm putting the Saberon faction in the bin. And you're saying to me, oh, Az, that means there's a faction that we need to do. Okay. 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 I'm just going to make up a faction right now. They're called the Time Walkers. And you could have actually made a faction called the Time Walkers. Maybe Chromie could have headed it up. And they called it the Time Walkers, and it wasn't the Caverns of Time, you know, the Keepers of Time rep, because we're in Draenor, we're away from Azeroth. So this is sort of Chromie, in essence, working by herself, or maybe with a couple of other bronze dragons if they were there as well. And they had discovered a loop in time with this Draenor because of all the alternative timelines stuff which has been going on. They had a loop in time which would actually take you to an alternative or to a past dungeon from Burning Crusade, from Wrath of the Lich King, you know, maybe in future from Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. But it actually would have been woven into the narrative. And instead of having like a daily quest, you could have had like a weekly maybe, or something like that. Or a weekly where you had to do 2 of the time walking dungeons. You were sucked back in time, and then there's an objective to complete. Instead of just having these trash dungeons, which are face walk nonsense, which nobody's going to care about. Because you've made them with no care. If you make something with no care, you can't turn to other people and say, give a shit. We can't do that. If I take a piece of paper here and I scrunch it up into a ball and say, that's a rose. That's a beautiful rose. People are going to go, no, it's a crumpled up piece of paper. It's not a rose, it's shit. And that's what you just do with Time Walker Dungeons. You just tweak the numbers down, and there's no heart and soul to it. There's no heart and soul to anything. So if there was an objective, maybe even switched out a boss, tweak something else, the end boss was actually from another alternative timeline, you could have had a really good play. Wait a minute, that's where X-Boss should have been. But instead of X-Boss being in this dungeon, suddenly it was Millhouse Manostorm. You know, just something quirky, something quite interesting. And the whole premise of the Time Walkers is to repair these little fragments of timeline which we had done because of crossing over to this alternative timeline. It could have been quite interesting. And that is just thought of at the top of my head right now doing this video. And that is more well, I think so anyway. You lot might disagree, but you'll be wrong. No, you'd be entitled to your own opinion. But I think that's more inventive than the 3 pieces of crap that you've put as factions in 6.2 that clearly have not had any thought put into them. So that's what you could have done. And then Mythic Dungeons, again. You've even admitted it. Well, the Mythic in name only. How can we care? How can we care when all you're doing is putting smoke and mirrors? Smoke and mirrors. Oh, these Mythic Dungeons. Does that mean they've got different mechanics? Does that mean they're going to be ultra tough? And it would involve people wiping. And if people didn't have care and attention, and if people weren't committed, then they would, group would fall apart, and tough tits for doing so. You know, only the committed would go through. No, it's sort of just like a heroic dungeon when you kind of dinged level 100 back in that time, but instead of calling it heroic, because we've already got heroics, we could just kind of call it mythic. So how can we care? How can we connect when your content, when you yourself have just said, well, it's just kind of smoke and mirrors, really? It's like when we called heroic dungeons in Mists of Pandaria heroic, and we knew they weren't, but, you know, we just gave them a name. That's all mythic dungeons are, a name. So we can't connect with this content. So let me address the point, which I said at the beginning and mentioned about 18 minutes in as well. I don't think you realise how much trouble you're in. Because for all the honesty which you kind of brought in the Q&A, for some of the honesty at least that you brought in the Q&A, you haven't backed any of your misgivings up, any of your missteps up. There's nothing in 6.2 that is repairing anything from 6.0's endgame and 6.1. And even what you've kind of said in those Q&As, we're just like, well, we're looking into technology that's going to scale existing dungeons as a patch goes on, which just says to me, wait a minute, all you're going to say is if we make a dungeon at day 1, by the end of the expansion, we could still be doing that dungeon simply because you've scaled it? That's not fun. That's not an inventive idea. That's, again, smoke and mirrors, and it's just delaying stuff. You're not thinking creatively. You're not thinking, do you know what? We have 8 dungeons on launch. It's 8 months into the expansion's life. There should be more dungeons. You can't say to us, well, it's either raid or a dungeon. Ice Crown Citadel, raid, big raid, 3 dungeons. Dragon's Soul, decent sized raid, 3 dungeons. This was stuff that's already been done in the past. You can't say with a development team twice the size of those, regardless of the changes to technology, you can't say, well, it's either one or the other. It's not. You've got to say, right, it's a raid and it is dungeons for people to do. It is alternatives for people to do. You can't say we're going to fix Ashran by just throwing conquest points at you now in 6.2. It doesn't fix Ashran. PvPers still need alternatives. They need to have the new battlegrounds to play in. They want new arenas to play in. The reason why you're in so much trouble, and I don't think you know it, is because all the noises that you're making aren't telling us you're looking to fix the game at all. All the noises that you're telling us are you don't really care. We don't care that you haven't got any dungeons because we're just looking to scale existing ones. We don't care that you haven't got any choices to do in PvP because we're just going to twiddle with the old conquest points numbers so you get more and then can buy more gear. We don't care that Apexis crystal zones are crap and reused, you know, because we're going to put a bonus event that gives you 2 or 3 times the amount of Apexis crystals that you should have done. We don't care that there's no connection to Time Walker dungeons because there'll be a bonus event where you can get a coin if you do 5 of them. That isn't inventive. That isn't taking the World of Warcraft to the next step. That isn't making the next expansion any tastier. Because one thing that you've got really going against you for BlizzCon this year when you announce the new expansion, who's going to believe you? No, seriously, you have destroyed so much of the trust of the community. Who is going to believe you? After 2013's Warlords of Draenor, who is going to believe you? Because what you mention at that BlizzCon, the vast majority of people are going to be thinking, but what are we actually going to get? They've said a great pitch, and the pitch is great, and everyone gets hyped initially. And then people go away, and the adrenaline wears off, and we deconstruct the information, and then people are going to say, yeah, but what exactly of those pieces of content are we going to see? You've lost 3 million in the first quarter. Your Stem the Flow patch has no connection to the community, like 5.2 really did. With its diversity and choices and fun. Fun and interesting content. This doesn't have it. So I can't see how you can stem the flow of subscription losses here unless it's purely by the WoW token. So going forward, people will just leave because you're not making the game any better. 6.2 is not a good patch. There is no connection to it. 6.3 is so far off now in a distance. I don't think you realise how much difficulty and how much trouble you are legitimately in right now. If the development team that created the content had just half, the desire and the love that clearly the art department showed, Warlords, I think, would be freaking amazing. But there is just so little kind of drive. There's this massive apathy within Blizzard Entertainment that you just don't seem to care. Well, we make a lot of money from the WoW token and we make a lot of money from our Blizzard store mounts. Lose 3 million, stick a Blizzard store mount on the store a few days later. It's just like, what? That's like insane. Absolutely insane logic. It's just saying, we don't care. We don't care. We've lost the subs. There you go. Mounts on now. We'll get some of that back. We're making good money from the services, paid services. But the more people that leave, just by design, you're going to lose money. Because you're going to lose their subs. Those people aren't going to be paying for services anymore. They're not going to be paying for flying mounts anymore from the store. And I don't think you quite understand the bigger picture here. You really don't. And I really hope that apathy goes, because I hated doing the video today about giving it like 5 out of 10. I hated that. I really wanted 6.2 to be a turn. I really did. I wanted it to be the 5.2 of this expansion. I wanted that love which I saw at BlizzCon 2013. That real kind of desire to make things great again. Even though we got a bit of a shell of that when it came to live. But I wanted to see that fight in 6.2. I wanted to see that, well, do you know something? Let's prove all those wankers wrong. We can freaking do this. We've got the people to do this. And you don't. The disconnection is huge. It really is. And I'm worried. I am legit worried. And Jeremy, Catman, said recently, it's so difficult after 10 years to make things fresh. I absolutely disagree. If somebody says, I haven't got any ideas, then you bring somebody who says, I've got ideas to the table. That's what I feel. Might sound a bit harsh, but that's what you need to do. If somebody says, I can't think of anything to do anymore because it's all been done, I feel, then you bring that person goes away from the table, whether it's permanently or reassigned is different kettle of fish, and you bring another person to the table that says, I have some ideas about where we can go going forward. And it doesn't feel as if we have that. It doesn't feel as if we have that person doing that or that connection to do that. And that's a shame, because I legitimately wanted to like 6.2, but it came very apparent very early on the PTR it was never going to happen, because you didn't care, Blizz. And if you don't care, how on earth are we meant to care? And that's something you've got to remedy. So there we go. AzChats 52 comes to an end. And I really hope that you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Those links are in the description down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.